Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered.
Welcome to the GSMC Travel Podcast. I'm your host Staci, here with Sarah.
Hi, Staci. You are Staci. I am Sarah.
That's correct. And today we are talking about New Zealand, and maybe that's why we're already starting off a little funny because our brain is on the total other side of the world.
We are in the wrong hemisphere.
We really are.
And it's a different season there, and it's a different time of day there.
Everything is different. So if we sound a little loopy, it's because we're in New Zealand. We really are.
Yes.
So there was this map that came out a few weeks ago, which had the names of countries and their own languages.
Yes, you were showing me that.
So the United States of America is really the United States of Amerigo because of Amerigo, who found it, not Columbus, who found Hispaniola. And Canada is the village for some reason. Canada, that huge swath of a country.
It just makes you think of the village people.
Well, my thought is like, Canada, that huge.
Right, the village.
Okay, sure. I'll go with that.
It's like one person per square mile or something. It's obviously that I just made that up.
Right. And New Zealand, interestingly, is land of the long white cloud, which just sounds beautiful, but also sounds fantasy-ish.
Yeah. Does it refer to fog? Does it refer to something else? Did they just give the names, or did they give explanations behind the names?
It just gave the name. And so when I first saw that, I was like, no, wait, New Zealand would probably be just the new land of zeal, wouldn't it? Do I not understand what? But I'm pretty sure they're taking that from the Maori name.
Right.
Because New Zealand does have Maori culture there as well.
And they would not have named it New Zeal.
Right. New Zeal. So New Zealand is well known for being the backdrop. Backdrop? Do I want to say backdrop? The location.
Setting, location, yeah.
For a number of movies,
yes,
which befits its Land of the Long White Cloud. They tend to be fantastical movies. Mm-hmm. Obviously well known for Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, and just being, and I mean, The Hobbit actually makes even more sense than all of Lord of the Rings, because New Zealand just looks like Hobbiton looks like.
Yes.
Like, I know you shot all the movies there, but seeing the pictures, I was like, no, that's Hobbiton. That's just Hobbiton.
Oh, yeah. So and I know it's still there from the set,
yes,
and you can go, and I so want to go. I mean, sometimes I actually want to live in a Hobbit house with a big round door. I don't know. They're just so cute.
They are, although I'm so used to doorknobs on one side or the other of the door that
not
the doorknob in the middle would probably throw me off.
Yeah.
But New Zealand also was the shooting place for Chronicles of Narnia, which again, very fantastical, fantasy, not real world. And so I am really dying now just to go to New Zealand, and I'd like to go and find a magical creature, but of course that probably would not happen. Not because they aren't there, but just because that's my luck. That's always how that works.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. It's like last week we were joking, maybe it was the week before, it doesn't matter. One episode recently we were joking about the drinking game for every time Staci said my Italian lover. And so, if she travels to Italy, it's going to be the Italian lover. If she travels to New Zealand, she's finding a unicorn.
Right, exactly. Yes. But still,
and for me, both of those things would be about as likely.
Right. I mean, it's not like they're hugely likely for me. But anyways, New Zealand, which is very interesting, there's actually a meme about New Zealand because it tends to be left off of world maps.
Oh, jeez.
Because it's down off the corner of Australia, and Australia is sort of the last big thing that people who aren't from New Zealand really know.
Right.
So when you see world maps, New Zealand doesn't exist.
Oh, I'm sorry, New Zealand.
I know, I'm sorry, Kiwis and Maori people. But it is actually 2 main islands plus 600 smaller islands,
Wow.
Which threw me off because I knew of the two main ones, because if you do bother to actually look at a map which put New Zealand on it, you can see that there's 2 islands, but then 600 smaller islands also make up New Zealand. I'm just like,
that's
what?
amazing. I wonder how many of those are populated.
I don't know.
Because I would imagine that quite a few of them aren't, not.
But maybe names.
And also how the culture is slightly different on those islands as opposed to, the bigger islands. There's just all kinds of questions that I now want answered. And I would want to go to all of them.
Right. I mean, 600, even if you did one a day, that's like more than a year and a half.
I was complaining about the 400 and however many kisses on the bridges in Italy, and now I want to go to 600 New Zealand islands, or 602, I guess, technically.
You can't do kisses, but you can do island hopping.
Yeah, apparently, yes.
So as you mentioned earlier, New Zealand is in the complete opposite hemisphere. It's in the southern hemisphere, which means its seasons are all opposite to ours in America.
It's always fascinated me because I had a friend who lived in Argentina for a year, and so for us, as we're traveling towards, let's say, Christmas, we might have snow, or we might have those things that we associate here with Christmas, whereas in the southern hemisphere it's summer,
right?
And so that's always been fascinating to me, how that would feel so different to me, because I have such a specific image of Christmas in my head.
Right. Like, I'm dreaming of a white Christmas.
Right.
I remember I didn't even know that until high school. And then we read a book that was set in South Africa. And at one point he's talking about, going back to school in January and how hot it was. And I'm like,
right.
Okay, I know you're in South Africa, but really? In January? It's really hot. What? And then looked it up, and it's like, oh, that's actually your summer.
Right.
Okay.
And, we've mentioned before that we live in Northern California. It doesn't really snow where we are. Right. If you travel a couple hours, you can go to the snow. So we don't have white Christmases here. And I've been to Hawaii at around Christmas time, and that's kind of the same thing. Very warm, they kind of go overboard on the Christmas themes. But that's also, there's still one of the states, and so they have that very United States centric idea of Christmas. Different cultures have different ideas of what Christmas is, and so I realize that we've gone off on a tangent, but I'm just fascinated by Christmas in summer, let's just say.
Christmas in July, almost literally. But this I didn't know either, because they're in the southern hemisphere, if I could talk. Again, my brain's in New Zealand. They actually have their own version of the Northern Lights, which are, of course, called the Southern Lights, or Aurora Australis. Australis?
Instead of the Aurora Borealis, which I guess that makes sense. I mean, it's the southern pole. Now I see. Stop it. Every day, every time we come on here and we're like, let's talk about this. And then I'm like, but I want to go there.
I know. I mean, and I've never seen either the Northern Lights or the Southern Lights.
I've seen the Northern Lights. They're amazing.
But just the fact that you could see the Southern Lights, like, I want to do that, as, in the way some people, rather than doing our traditional American white Christmas, even if, it doesn't snow where you live, that people who travel to, like, tropical locations for Christmas or whatever, I'd want to travel to New Zealand because it's their summer, but that's also when you can sort of see the Southern Lights. Oh, wait, no, I'm confused. Oh, I'm sorry. I completely said that backwards. I apologize, listeners. You maybe could see them at Christmas, but December is sort of the ending point of the Southern Lights season. I apologize. I got that confused.
Misreading of the notes. Again, brains are in New Zealand.
But I guess, I don't know if professional athletes do this, but I always used to wonder about this for, like, Winter Olympic athletes and how they train during the year, because A, no snow where I live ever, but B, if you rely on snow, what do you do during the summer? Like, just off season or cross training or whatever. But interestingly, because they're in the southern hemisphere, in New Zealand the ski season starts in June.
Right. But I mean, it's the same thing for here. If you're a skier, you still can't ski during the off season, so you have to train differently.
But I think that would be very interesting. Be like, okay, let me train during winter here,
right,
and then be going to school, and then, hey, summer break, I'm going to go to New Zealand and train there,
right,
because it's snowing there.
Or the Winter Olympics. I've never thought about that. The Winter Olympics for the Southern Hemisphere is in the summer.
I mean, they did used to have Winter and Summer Olympics at the same time, but I was a very, very young child when that changed, so I don't actually know how that worked either.
Interesting.
But interestingly, so because of that whole season switching thing, the main time to visit is March through April, which sounds like a and of course it's spring, but it's fall. And that's the reason why, is because it's fall. We've gotten out of all the great summer. We're not yet into the cool winter. So there's not as many tourists. So that's actually the time to go, even though you're thinking, oh, spring. But it's like, no, it's fall. All the leaves are falling off. It's not what you're thinking of.
I wonder if they have, I would imagine they have fall colors, but, some places have more impressive fall colors than other. And I just think of New Zealand as vastly beautiful, so they must have beautiful fall colors. They just must.
It must absolutely be the case. So anyways, we talked about New Zealand having the 600 smaller islands. And when we come back from our break, we will be talking about the Bay of Islands. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Travel Podcast.
Always on the go, but the day just won't be one without your Hollywood fix. Let Golden State Media Concepts Entertainment Podcast take care of that. Jordan and Keith is Entertainment Tonight meets Access Hollywood.
I'm Jordan. The guy laughing, that's Keith.
Yeah, I'm Keith.
An all-inclusive look of pop culture.
Welcome back to the GSMC Travel Podcast. Today we are talking about the land of the long white cloud, New Zealand, with its 602 or so islands. And in the northern part of the North Island, there is a place called the Bay of Islands.
Okay, so I'm assuming it's a bay and it has islands. I mean, maybe I'm being too literal.
It might be a misnomer. I'm not sure. There are several cities in it, but the Bay of Islands as a whole actually has a lot to offer. For people who want to go, you can swim with dolphins, you can go parasailing, you can go scenic and wreck diving, skydiving, horse riding, cycling trails, sailing and cruises, glow-warm caves, which that's really interesting. You should probably, Google that and look that up, glow-warm caves.
They're really cool
pretty.
Looking. And I am actually looking at pictures of the Bay of Islands right now, and it truly is a bay of islands.
Yes.
And, it's very pretty. The water is very pretty.
I mean, New Zealand. Is there any non-pretty parts of New Zealand? I mean, I'm sure if you go into the sewers, it's not pretty, but you probably wouldn't be going there. So
we'd have to ask somebody from New Zealand and say, I think I actually know someone from New Zealand. Yes, she is from New Zealand. I should ask her if there are non-pretty parts.
Where are they so we can avoid them?
Right, exactly.
But, I mean, looking at the bay, the water is very pretty. And the swimming with dolphins, I looked up, also looks amazing. Mm-hmm. Just because this is actually a thing that, a couple of different, I don't want to call them cruise liners because they're small boats, but tour boat companies.
Sure. Yeah.
Words that they offer this ability to go out. They'll take you out on a boat. It's still
kind of a cruise. I mean, it's it's just a smaller cruise.
A bay cruise.
I think a bay cruise.
Day only cruise where they take you out on a boat.
It's like Gilligan's Island, a 3-hour tour.
Right. Oh man, no. Where they take you out on a boat to where the dolphins are, and you can actually get into the water with the dolphins and get that really close up and personal, seeing the dolphin jump over you and everything. And I'm just like, that looks so amazing. And yet on the one hand, I should have known that was a thing you could actually do. But on the other hand, it just felt not real.
Right.
Outside of a sea park.
Or a movie montage.
Right.
I feel like, with my luck, the day that I went out, the dolphins would be nowhere to be found.
Right.
They'd be like, no, that Sarah chick's coming out. We're not swimming with her.
We don't like that person. No, we're going away.
Yes, I just anthropomorphized the dolphins, but
so it is. But there's also scenic and wreck diving. So New Zealand being, near Australia, there's reefs and corals, and there's actually a boat whose name I'm totally blanking on at the moment, which I should really know, which was the first Greenpeace ship that Greenpeace made, and it got sunk. And so Greenpeace, being Greenpeace, was like, okay, let's do something environmentally friendly with this. And so they sunk it off the Bay of Islands so that it could, be a place for the reef to grow, to sort of serve as a
Oh, which they actually now do a lot of different things like with that, they sink various things to help the reefs grow, because unfortunately we're destroying the reefs.
We really are.
Yeah. But that's cool. I mean, that's so very Greenpeace.
Right. Oh, is that the ship is the Rainbow Warrior?
Well, I'm Googling, but I don't know if that's what it actually is. So I'm checking, but my internet's being very, very slow.
But anyways, I think that's so very interesting that like Greenpeace, the ship, and we're going to sink it. And you can now go. And if you look up the video for this, it almost looks like a mix between Little Mermaid and the beginning of Titanic.
Oh,
because it feels like, that part in Little Mermaid where she goes into the ship and she's looking for the hang doodle and what's it called?
dingle hopper.
all the human artifacts. But because it's covered in this reef, it does sort of remind you of that early part of the Titanic where they're in the submarine and going through and looking for the chest and just seeing, what was once this really, well, I don't know that the Greenpeace ship was that grand, but once the ship that was made, for humans to live on, just completely covered in all this sea and plant life.
Yes, it does look like that is the Rainbow Warrior.
Which is now the Reef Warrior, I guess.
Oh, wait, no, that's a bombing. Never mind.
We apologize.
We
We're completely off.
Apparently, my Google skills are in New Zealand also, and we've left. My brain is just not here. So, I would encourage you to look it up for yourself, and because then you'll find the real answer and not just us
our crazy
randomly throwing out words.
But interestingly, New Zealand, of course, with the beautiful landscape and all that. Hiking, of course, naturally is just a big thing there, but is called tramping.
Yes.
Which just the first time I saw that, I was thinking of like a tramp,
right?
like on the railroad.
Yes.
So I was like, so you go around looking like a hobo? That's a thing you do in New Zealand? What? And then when I saw it, I was like, so it's a thing that regular people do. So camping, but with a trailer. What's tramping? But tramping is just their way of saying hiking,
right? Because you tramp along,
right?
Yeah, it is. It's just a different word,
and it's very, very big in New Zealand. Just all seasons, although they do, with weather, the weather can be a bit iffy at times,
right? So
definitely want to be prepared for that. There's also, of course, Maori cultural performances because the Maori people are still a major culture in New Zealand. They're, the Aboriginal people of those islands. And then Britain colonized it. I guess you say colonized, yes. Mm-hmm. And so there are several different places where you can see Maori cultural performances, including I apologize if I pronounced this wrong, Waitangi Treaty Grounds. And the Waitangi Treaty is somewhat contentious, I guess, in New Zealand because it's the treaty that sort of was signed and made New Zealand, part of the British Empire. So gave them the rule over it, and they've been dealing with that ever since. Whether you're, for or against that or what have you, it would be a really interesting place to go just for the history of it.
Right, yeah.
And they do the Maori cultural performances there, with the haka and the dance. The haka that most people,
think of with the tongue and the
from the black rugby team.
Oh yeah,
that you see. I don't even know how they do in the Olympics, but you keep seeing that if you ever watch rugby during the Olympics, is we must show them doing the haka before the game.
Yes,
it doesn't matter about the game itself, but we have to show the haka.
So the Waitangi Treaty was signed on February 6th, 1840. In case you're interested in a little history, it is bilingual.
Nice,
but as all treaties of that ilk tend to be a little controversial because they create a different form of rule,
right?
So,
and I mean, we have our own sort of history that way with Hawaii, which was its own kingdom, and then we, forced the royal family to abide by our rules as it was.
Yes,
that's the history of the world, and we're not going to get into that because this is not a history podcast. But
let's do that next.
But if that is something that interests you, especially the history of places and how Land of the Long White Cloud came to be New Land of Zeal, that would definitely be a place to check out.
Yeah, that just sounds really fascinating to me. So I'm putting that on my list for our imaginary New Zealand trip. I definitely would want to go there and learn more about the history.
There's also, I guess, if you really want to see the beautifulness of New Zealand from the sky, several different ways to do that. There's skydiving, which I would not do on my imaginary New Zealand trip. But then there's also scenic flights that can be offered through helicopters. And then there's also parasailing.
Well, the skydiving would be a scenic flight up until the point where they shoved you out of the plane.
And then it's a scenic fall. It's a scenic fall after that. But the parasailing looks really cool because, of course, you know, you're in this... I'm going to call it a parachute, but clearly I've never been parasailing. That's being dragged along behind, you know, a boat. So that gives it the wind and the lift to get up in the air. And it allows you to see sort of the same area, but from a much different view.
Right. Yeah, I think that the scenic, the flight would be fun. I mean, the only way I could actually go skydiving is if I did it tandem and the person that I was strapped to jumped out of the plane, because that I could not force myself to actually jump out of a plane.
I mean, you'd have to force me into the plane because if I know that's where we're going, I'm definitely, I don't care that I'm attached to this other person, I will bodily fight you to not go up in that plane.
And on that note,
we're going to take another short break, but when we come back, we'll be talking about a tip and a site to help plan your New Zealand trip. Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Travel Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back. You're listening to the GSMC Travel Podcast. And today we're talking about New Zealand, where we seem to be, at least mentally. And we earlier talked about all the different outdoor activities you can do with the tramping and the swimming with dolphins and the parasailing. But we also, I think, mentioned that the weather can be a bit changeable. Yeah. Even though it's a beautiful country, it can at times, you know, be like, oh, beautiful day, and then rain all of a sudden.
Well, it's got amazing mountain ranges. So anytime you have that kind of differential, it can cause fronts and all kinds of, extreme weather situations. So
maybe this is where the name came from, the end of the long white cloud. Like the cloud that you see up in the sky that may or may not rain. We're not sure yet.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
Who knows? Maori people, let us know. But anyway, so the tip for the day, and this is actually kind of a tip you should probably consider almost anywhere you plan to travel, which is pack so that you can layer in any circumstance, but especially in New Zealand, because there's so much to do, and it's not actually a huge place, so you can do a lot of different things just within the small area. So you can go from, you know, being in town to going tramping to going sailing to doing a night cruise or whatever. You'll want to have clothes that can go along with that.
And now let's just be clear that we are saying pack. For pack layers, do not start out with your swimming suit and then put on. I mean, you can, but
that's the plan for the day,
right? You know, it just might be a little awkward if you are trying to remove that many layers just for basic bathroom needs.
Right? Yeah. I mean, especially with a swimsuit.
Right, for women. Yeah.
So, I mean, one of the things, and I'm not the best with layering because, again, Northern California, I don't really need to be. But one of the things I found when looking this up is merino thermals, which are evidently like the Swiss Army knife of dressing for the outdoors, which I desperately need the Swiss Army knife of anything, including an actual Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
just the sort of prepared for any sort of situation so I can MacGyver my way out of it. That to have merino thermals for dressing in layers is really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I keep saying this. I grew up in Montana, so it took me forever once I moved out of Montana to realize that I did not have to take a pair of socks with me everywhere I went because it does not necessarily cool down at night.
Wait, what?
Yeah, totally. Even in the summer, nights are cold, so you take a long sleeve shirt and socks wherever you go.
Aren't you already wearing socks?
If it's summer, no.
Okay.
You might be wearing sandals.
Okay, but like in the winter, do you take an extra pair of socks?
Oh, yeah, you travel with boots. Actually, in the winter, you travel with, especially if you're driving somewhere, in your car, you should definitely have gloves and extra socks and good boots and anything you need in case your car breaks down and you have to walk somewhere.
Wow, I did not know that at all.
Or an emergency kit in case you have to stay in your car for any length of time.
Yeah, that really doesn't happen here except in the mountains. And I'm not from the mountains, so I wouldn't know that.
So these are things that I grew up knowing and now I've kind of not had to know for a while, which I'm okay with.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice here. But so, example, a day in New Zealand could easily go from a morning on the ski slope. I'd like to know what that is.
It sounds like something from Dr. Seuss.
A morning on the ski slopes, a day on the water, and then a night in the mountains or in the city.
That sounds
and if you're
fabulous,
if you leave your hotel room and then don't come back, you really need to be prepared for that clothing wise.
Yes, absolutely. Or be prepared to go back to your hotel several times a day in order to change.
You could do that also, but less efficient and takes out time from your day to do things.
Right, but y'all got to make your own decisions. So if that works for you, go ahead. But
I mean, for certain people who are like, you know what, and while we're in the hotel room, maybe a nap. Yeah. that might be a sneaky plan to have. Just saying. But the site for today is travelmath.com. And this is so interesting. So Travel Math is a way to let you calculate a trip by the travel time and cost. It's really good for if you're trying to decide whether to drive somewhere or to fly somewhere.
I love these sites that you keep finding that help you plan things when you might not be so sure of what you're doing.
Right.
Like last episode's tip helped you to plan on a budget. You want to do X, Y, and Z, but the things that you can think of are destinations that you can't afford. So that site would give you alternate destinations that would get you to what you wanted to do in your budget.
So if you're planning, to go home for Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever, and you're like, do we really want to shell out for the flight, especially during the holidays? That's a whole another mess. Or do I want to drive, which would be, simpler, but maybe not quicker and maybe too tiring. And especially if you've got children, like my family actually did this.
There are mountain passes that you have to navigate in the snow.
My family actually did this, and Travel Math didn't exist at the time. But when we went to Disneyland when I was a child, we were originally going to drive, which is like at minimum 8 hours with 2 children 8 years and younger. Not super fun. So it was finally decided, you know what, let's fly, because that's only about like an hour and a half.
Right.
And it's like, that is worth however much money more that costs than to drive. Let's do that.
That's another tip. That's another travel tip for people who don't live in California. California is a very long state.
Very long.
Let's say you were coming to Los Angeles and you knew that Staci and I lived in Northern California, and you're like, hey, we're in California, you should come visit. My husband has family members who do this all the time. We're like, that's cool, where are you? San Diego. Right. That's still 10 hours away. Yeah. And then throw in traffic.
Yeah. Or even people in America will do that, where it's like, oh, where are you from? Northern California? Oh, so you live near Hollywood? No. What? No, not. Or you live near the beach? No, also kind of no. So
yeah, that's not a New Zealand travel tip, but just a reminder, California, bigger than you think.
But this site was interesting. I plugged in from where I live in California to New Zealand just to see what it would tell me. And I did it by, I don't know, driving time or distance or something. And the site, whoever made it, clearly has a bit of a sense of humor, because the result that came back was driving from California to New Zealand, complicated. You might have to swim.
Nice.
Maybe think of flying instead.
Which is definitely going to add time to your trip if you are planning on swimming.
Or unless you have, one of those spy cars that also is a submarine, in which case, yes, please. And can I come with you?
Exactly.
But yeah, so this site definitely, realized not even in the same country, not even in the same continent or continental shelf. That's not a trip we can calculate by driving.
It's also an interesting site because it displays the amount of carbon emission that your trip will generate. So you can, if you're concerned about your carbon footprint, this will tell you the best way to travel to minimize your carbon footprint.
I would totally do that and drive my family crazy of being like, let's fly. No, but we can't fly because it'll generate way more carbon emissions. We're not driving for 6 hours.
We cannot swim to New Zealand. We do have to fly or take a boat.
Or something. But the carbon. I'd actually love to see that conversation go down. They'd probably throw me over the boat on the way to or from and be like, we're not dealing with her anymore.
Oh, there's so much death in the studio today. Earlier on the Health and Wellness podcast, we were talking about AI killing us, and now we're talking about Staci's family throwing her overboard.
Death in the most unlikely of circumstances on these podcasts. We'll try and work on that.
Yes, so we're apparently going to do a history podcast, and then we'll just do Death by Staci and Sarah.
On that very, very cheerful note.
New Zealand, yay!
New Zealand, definitely beautiful, land of the long white cloud and fantastical beasts. So thanks for listening to the GSMC Travel Podcast. Tune in next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From travel to health and wellness to entertainment and life and happiness to sex and relationships. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast.